हेलो एंड वेलकम टू बायजूस IAS। बायजूस IAS में आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है। I will be discussing today's Hindu newspaper with all of you. I welcome you all. I hope all of you are doing well, healthy, hearty and fine. Yes? So as you know that this discussion is a really fruitful discussion, and surprisingly over the weekends we get to see really good articles from the point of view of knowledge as well as from the point of view of examination. Examination oriented knowledge and articles are really interesting to read, as well as they give you a good amount of knowledge or requisite knowledge that you can apply in other facets of life, right? So I hope you enjoy today's newspaper just as much as I did to prepare today's newspaper for each one of you. Yes? So the topics to be covered in today's newspaper are all these topics. Which page do they belong from? Are they the topics which are given as a part of the editorial page, which means are they written by the editor, or are they written on the open page? They are an open editorial article. So today's newspaper covers a variety of articles. They come from the economics background, like the first one, inflation slowed yet no relief on food bills, followed by a risky premise. This also is an economics central article, followed by industrial output grew by 5.7% in February. Production levels at a 3-month low. The production has reduced, surprisingly. I mean, the production should have increased, but it has reduced. So we'll be analyzing all of these articles in proper detail. I'll be giving you the background vis-a-vis these articles. Followed by that, we have an article which is important from GS2 perspective, governance, overlapping with science and technology. A data for better education, education that leads to contributing towards a demographic dividend. It should not turn into a demographic burden. And an article that focuses on the environmental aspect. We are talking about fauna, not flora, but we are talking about fauna. So these are the articles that we'll be analyzing in today's newspaper. Yes? So I hope you are as excited as I am. I can see more students have joined in. Hello, hello. I welcome all of you to this wonderful session. Yes. So look at the first article, page 1. This is from the perspective of General Studies paper number 3, Indian economy. We are talking about the economic section. Within the economic section, what is important? The thing that is important is that it is important from the point of view of mains, GS3. Certain things would be important for prelims as well, right? So I'll explain this article with the help of a Venn diagram. When we talk about inflation, right? We're talking about inflation. So, talking about inflation, let's suppose this is the entire inflationary tendency, inflationary aspect of the entire country, inflationary aspect of entire India. This entire inflation, let's take an example, is 10%. This is just an example, it is not 10%. I'm rounding off the figure to explain it to you better. It has reduced from 10% to, let's say, 8%. The inflation, overall inflation in India has come down from 10% to 8%. Whereas, within this inflationary aspect, when we in particular talk about food inflation, we are talking about only the food articles, food inflation, the inflation has actually risen. It has gone up from 5% to 6%. Now, the cause of concern is that overall the government of India claims pride that look, we have reduced inflation. The wholesale inflation has come down, the retail inflation has come down. This is basically the retail figure. Retail figure means the figure at your and my level. This is retail inflation. So when I say that the retail inflation has come down, it basically means that the prices at which goods and services are available for you and me, those prices have come down, which is a good thing. But followed by that, when we in particular focus on one aspect, and that aspect is just food inflation, just the food aspect, that food inflation actually has increased from 5 to 6%. We are talking about this food inflation increasing and not easing is a big cause of concern. I repeat, it's a huge cause of concern, which is what brings us to a very important aspect, something that Government of India and the Ministry of Consumer Affairs has been grappling. This issue they have been grappling for the last 3 months. When we talk about CPI, Consumer Price Index, a measure which is used by RBI to frame policies, overall when we talk about CPI, it has come down. But when we are talking about CFPI, Consumer Food Price Index, it has gone up. This has not eased, which is why the people like you and me, the general people, the mango people, the Aam Aadmi has been struggling big time. And this might be a huge cause of concern because this is an election year and Consumer Food Price Index has not eased for the last 6 months. It has consistently gone up, and this is something which is a big cause of concern for the ruling party. So when we talk about retail inflation, this time we are not just focusing on retail inflation, but let me give you a very, very important aspect that this article is focusing upon. It focuses on retail inflation. Yes, this is one thing that it focuses on, retail inflation. That retail inflation has gone down, Consumer Food Price Index inflation has gone up. But other than this, it also bifurcates inflationary tendencies with respect to other parameters. What are those parameters? Let's have a look. They're interesting parameters. They are comparing urban versus rural inflation, urban inflation vis-a-vis rural inflation. They are also comparing the change month over month, month on month change, highly important, month on month change in terms of inflation. They are also comparing the impact of monetary policy on inflation. So as you know that monetary policy review is done by the Reserve Bank of India, the central bank of any country for that matter takes care of its monetary policy. It changes every 2 months, or the review is done every 2 months. It's a bi-monthly exercise. So when we talk about changes that are effected every 2 months, that kind of an impact is seen, and this impact is on inflation. So we are comparing monetary policy changes on inflation in 1 year compared with some other year, compared with some other month. This is what they have to compare. Alright. So this kind of comparison, or rather I should say, this detailed analysis has been given from the point of view of inflation. Now look at a very interesting part. What does it say? It says that retail inflation has risen. Retail inflation has fallen, whereas Consumer Food Price Index has risen. This has increased. Other than this, it also analyzes that urban inflation has fallen, which means inflation in urban areas, like I stay in Delhi and the people staying in tier 1, tier 2 cities, all of these are considered to be urban areas. Inflation in urban areas have come down. Surprisingly, the rural inflation has not fallen to a great extent. It has fallen, but to a minuscule extent. So inflation in rural areas is actually damaging the rural populations and their pockets, their wallets, because rural areas, the earnings are as it is low. If the inflation is high, that inflation would eat into their money, eat into their budgets. Then we talk about month on month change. Every month when we start comparing, so 1 month probably was better as compared to the last month in terms of decreasing inflation. But again, when we talk in terms of certain items which are necessities, like crude oil, like food articles, like vegetables, so they have changed and they have increased. And when we talk about the impact of monetary policy on inflation, When I say monetary policy, it basically means interest rates. Interest rates are high in India, which is why the inflation is also high. So the analysis that has been given, it has been given very, very pointedly bifurcated into multiple things. Now let me show it to you. Have a look. The retail inflation saw a 10-month low of 4.85% from 5.1% in February. This is a 10-month low. Food inflation remained high, a huge cause of concern. Now just try and think, what concerns a common man? What concerns a common person? As I stated, Aam Aadmi, mango people. What concerns you and me? I am not bothered about whether the prices of steel have come down or not, whether the prices of iron ore have come down or coal has come down. That's okay. Have the prices of things which I consume on a daily basis, the vegetables, the food grains, the fruits, have they decreased by any chance? This is what I need to understand. They have not decreased. On the contrary, they have increased. So it's a big cause of concern for me. Food inflation remained high, 8.52%, with cereals and meat prices rising, while vegetable, pulses, spices and eggs maintained at double-digit inflation. And you will be surprised if I tell you what is this double digit. This double digit is over 20%, which means prices this year have risen by more than 20% for these basic items. Now, when you talk about steel, iron ore, etc., and you compare it with pulses, pulses is that thing which is consumed on a daily basis almost in every household. You have dal, I have dal. So obviously we are consuming pulses. If pulses prices are increasing, I don't care about the entire world, what is going on. It is heavy on my pocket. Similarly, if you compare urban versus rural inflation, this is a different parameter. Urban inflation has seen a fall from 4.8% to 4.14, a significant fall, whereas rural consumers have seen slight fall from 5.45 to 5.34. It would be considered to be still high for rural areas. Month-on-month changes, CPI remained unchanged, but the food price index increased by about 0.2%. This is what we have been seeing. Economists predict a potential spike in food inflation due to the ongoing heat wave. Now just imagine, what are we trying to say? Here there is this disclaimer that we are going to see higher inflation in terms of food items in the future, which means that food prices are going to rise in future. Vegetables will keep on getting expensive. Rise in crude oil prices and persistent food inflation may delay interest rate cuts by India's central bank. India's central bank, we are facing what? A delay in interest rate cut. Interest rates are not cutting. If the interest rates are also high, obviously inflation would be high because loans are expensive. If the interest rate is high, I am borrowing money at a higher interest rate, which means it is expensive. If I borrow money which is expensive, I will sell the product that is expensive. So it is directly correlated. Now this is something that we have been seeing, and there is no relief on food bills, which is a big cause of concern, right? So this is the entire article. The analysis that has been given is amidst all of these things. Now looking at this, looking at the causes of inflation in this particular segment and this particular last quarter, I would say from January to March. If you look at that quarter and if you look at how the inflation has impacted rural or urban areas, how much has it impacted in this particular case. So this is something that we have to understand from the point of view of what is RBI projecting or what is RBI's projections. When we include RBI projections, RBI's projection should be to decrease the rate of inflation. Inflation rate should decrease. Now the entire bone of contention or the entire point is, are you really working towards decrease in inflation? Is my simple question. So when I say that inflation has to decrease, what exactly is it that you are doing in terms of decreasing inflation? Is RBI trying to decrease the money supply in the economy? This is the way how inflation can get controlled? Or RBI is conducting open market operations in order to be able to control inflation? Is RBI doing all these things? Are they being able to make sure that they are projecting in terms of decreasing the money supply in the economy? Is a simple question. If the retail inflation does not reduce, we are looking at even higher prices this season because of the heat wave. Now, why would that be? The heat wave would result into spoilage of crops, or the crop productivity would go down. If the crop productivity goes down, what would happen? What happens when the crop productivity goes down? The supply remains meager. The supply remains less. If the supply is less, automatically demand is the same, supply is less. What would happen to the prices? The prices would spike. The prices would further spike. So RBI, if it has projected this kind of a happening, then what should RBI do? RBI should partner with the Ministry of Consumer Affairs, Ministry of Agriculture, to use the buffer stock to increase the supply so that demand and supply are equal and the prices don't rise. This is what we need to understand. Now have a look. The food inflation details, you'll be surprised to hear the figures. Vegetable inflation cooled slightly to 28.3%. Can you imagine? After cooling, it is in double digits, and that too such high double digits, 28.3%. Cereals, meat and fish prices rose. They have increased. Spices maintained double-digit inflation but moderated from previous levels. These are the food inflation details. Very, very important. When we talk about these things, so what has the banking sector, what have the think tanks projected about this? Bank of Baroda's chief economist Madan Sabnavis highlights ongoing pressure on food prices, particularly due to the present heat wave. Everyone knows about the heat wave. Inflation in household goods and services eased slightly, but personal care products surged over 6% in March. But again, coming back to the same point, what are they doing with respect to the food inflation? So RBI expects real inflation, this is RBI projection, to ease to an average of 4.5% this year from 5.4% recorded in 23-24. This financial year just got over on the 31st of March. They are looking at ease of retail inflation. But at the same time, if you are not able to limit the prices of food, it will be disastrous for the people. April to June quarter is projected to have an average inflation of 4.9%, which is still high, but still it would be controlled. So now it is just a matter to see, and it would be interesting to see how RBI is controlling food inflation during the elections or post the elections. Now let me also give you one aspect. Because the elections are due to happen, the government of India, the Ministry of Agriculture as well as the Finance Ministry, they had already announced free food grains to 900 million people. Now just imagine, we are sitting in 2023 and this was done way in advance. It was done last year in November. The government of India has announced 900 million people to get food grains at subsidized prices or probably almost at free cost. The cost is on government of India. 90 crore people are getting free food because they cannot afford 2 square meals a day. I mean, this is what is portrayed. At one end, we are trying to say India rising, India shining, India growing, India developing, economic growth, economic development, etc. On the other hand, 90 crore people need the government support in terms to rise. So aren't these two conflicting objectives? Just try to think. Give in the comment section and tell me, what do you think about this? Alright, a good article, and keep the space open. Follow the RBI's articles in future to know about how these changes would be affected. Right? So I have given certain brief about inflation and how is it measured. So you can read this later. Coming to the second article, we are talking about science and technology. So this article does not only focus on science and technology, it also focuses on GS2. Governance. It focuses on GS2 governance. So we are talking about GS2, we are talking about this particular aspect. What is it that we are referring to? Let's try to understand in this particular aspect. So there is a topic in GS2 by the name of issues related to health and education. You can use this knowledge in that article as well as to some extent in science and technology. Now let me tell you about education in India. A little background. When we talk about education, according to Article 21 capital A, Right to Education Act is a fundamental right. So it is included under Article 21A and these are fundamental rights, which means any kid aged between 6 to 14 years of age can demand free education from the government. free education from the government, and government has to provide that education to that kid up to 14 years of age. This roughly translates to class 1 to class 8. Alright, class 1 to class 8. After that, students are on their own. And this started in a limited capacity in the year 2000 via Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, SSA. Later in 2009, it translated into a fundamental right, Article 21 capital A. And then we are trying to achieve education at this particular age group, 6 to 14 years of age. Followed by that, in the last 6 to 8 years, the focus has been on vocational education via National Skill Development Corporation and Skill India Mission. Skill India Mission. On this particular basis, we have had this kind of an understanding and this kind of an application. So, vocational education, Skill India Mission, followed by this, the digital revolution. Now, these are this is the timeline, this is the chronology that I am telling to you. The first is education, that you focus on education from the year 2000, 2009, and it continues till date, right? After that, we talk about vocational education, National Skill Development Corporation, Skill India Mission. Then we are talking about digital revolution, that now digitized way of providing education, like you are receiving that digitized education. We are able to provide, I am able to provide sitting in Delhi. You are able to receive that sitting all across the entire country. This is digitized education. We are leveraging technology in order to be able to impart education and learning. So it has evolved. Over the last 20 years, education imparting has evolved. But what is the entire issue? This sounds good as it sounds. Are we able to provide those things to the people? Are we able to provide that quality of education to the students who are in this age bracket? This came about as a survey, and the name of the survey, it's a very popular survey, ASER. ASER, the full form is Annual Status of Education Report, ASER. Now you will tell me in the comment section who publishes this report. Which agency is responsible for publishing this report? Is this a government agency? Are we talking about Ministry of Education, Ministry of HRD, or are we talking about any other agency? Annual Survey of Education Report, what does it state? It does this unbiased review of the kind of education that is being imparted in schools, especially those schools that fall under the Right to Education Act. So whom did they review is a bigger question than what did they review. Whom did they review? They reviewed the education details of students who are aged between 14 to 18 years. 14 to 18 years. 14 to 18 year kids, they are big kids, they're 14 years old. They should have been in class 9, 10, 11, 12. So these kids are basically between class 9 to class 12. They are no longer kids. Alright, they are children, they will be adults in soon. So these kids, when they were surveyed about their education, they did not know how to write their name. They did not know how to write their name. They did not know how to do basic math, like 2 plus 2. They cannot tell what 2 plus 2 is. They cannot read 2 sentences from a book, whether it's in their regional language or Hindi or English or whatever. They cannot read two straight sentences. So when we are talking about this survey, when we are talking about this age group, what is it that has happened? What is the result of this particular rate of education is the big question. What are you trying to provide? What kind of education is this? It became a big question mark, which is why this particular survey, when they figured out these statistics, that so many students who qualify under RTE, Right to Education Act, don't have the basic tendency to be able to disclose what they should be doing, and they are not able to have this kind of an acquisition at this age. This is a good age. This is a senior age, I would say, in terms of school. If they don't know what a class 2 student can do at the age of 14 or 15, then obviously the foundation that has been laid is pretty weak. When the foundation is weak, how can you rise? How can you go to higher education? And this is secondary education. Class 9 to class 12 is secondary education, higher secondary education. How do you go to this level? If you are already at this level, just stating that I am in class 9 does not state or does not give you the leverage of ignoring that you don't know anything what has been taught up till class 8. So your foundation, your premise, your primary schooling education is lacking, which is what is the biggest cause of concern for India. So this particular survey, it did not only point out the problem, but it also suggested a certain solution of this intervention which is required by the government. You have to go beyond the schooling. For those kids who do not want to study or they do not wish to study, you have to go beyond the school. And when you go beyond schooling, this beyond schooling requires you to have good amount of vocational education. Vocational means they require you to have good amount of skill-based courses, even if these kids are not educated or they don't have formal education, but they have vocational education. Or these kids, if they don't have access to schools, access to infrastructure, what can they do? They can go or they can probably receive education via digitization, via leveraging internet, leveraging technology for achieving education. This is something that this article focuses upon. Let's have a look. Acer highlights foundational skills of 14 to 18-year-olds, this age group in particular, drawing attention to learning outcomes and actionable insights for policymakers. Actionable insights for policymakers. The report reveals concerning data on reading abilities. They don't know how to read, basic reading, indicating a need for deeper analysis and intervention. So the study it is not a narrow study like you just have surveyed 200, 500 students. No, it has been done across states, across districts. Let me tell you, 26 states, 28 rural districts, revealing that 26% of 14 to 18-year-olds cannot read a standard 2-level text. And 26% is a very big number. It is 1/4 of the entire number of students. They cannot read 2 lines of class 2. So failure in primary education has not developed their basic foundation. They contribute to current challenges in acquiring foundational skills. Now, trying to impart that same education that has to be given to a 4 or 5-year-old, that you have to give to a 10, 15-year-old. Analysis suggests that a significant portion of a 14 to 18-year-old lacks basic reading skills. They are either enrolled in lower grades or not attending school. They are either enrolled, so a class 9 student is actually studying in class 2 or he is not going to school. So low attendance in secondary grade underscores the need for holistic interventions beyond school-based programs. This is something that Government of India focused upon, but when you don't have students because they have not been able to clear class 8, how will the beyond school programs be successful? So then they have given a solution as vocational education, skill-based education. The perceptions vary across regions with negative stereotypes prevalent in some areas. Context-driven vocational courses and on-the-job training can make vocational education more aspirational. This is something that has to be done. But it depends on how the Government of India, how the Ministry of Education imparts this education. This is highly important. How do you impart this education? Do you have teachers? Do you have the requisite infrastructure? How would you do it? Leveraging technology. If you have access to a smartphone, you can provide the youth an opportunity to leverage digital technology for education. Schools and colleges should collaborate with EdTech agencies and industries to align digital resources with youth aspirations. These have to be aligned, this has to be provided. And the actionable insights are, they just don't give challenges. There is a need to move beyond lamenting over challenges and focus on discerning where, how and who should act based on data-driven insights. Which ministry should act? What kind of programs should be implemented? So don't just highlight on problems, but also give solutions and try to solve the problem. Look, problems are everywhere, and you because you're studying for this examination, you are studying to become a bureaucrat. In order to become a bureaucrat, you will be asked the solutions for these problems. You are not being made into a bureaucrat because you know the problems. Problems everyone knows. I also know a poor person, an uninformed person, an uneducated person, a child, an aged person. Everyone knows about the problems of a district. Why are you being given that coveted designated seat? Why are you being put on that pedestal? Why are you being called in the merit? Because you will apply the solution. So start thinking, how will you apply a solution for this particular problem? How will you do it? Try to think. Coming to the next article, again an interesting article. We are talking about environment. Now this is not just when we talk in terms of environment, it is not about spoiling flora and fauna. It's much beyond that. We are taking a deep analysis, and this time it's not flora, this time it's fauna. So there are multiple terms which were used in this article, and I was just trying to understand that how do I provide these things to you? How do I make sure that you get this proper understanding of this article? So let's understand what has been stated over here. There is one term when we talk in terms of the wildlife. The first term is rescue. All right, the first term is rescue. The second term is conflict. Conflict means that there is a conflict, man-animal conflict. All right, rescue, man-animal conflict. And the third is preventive measures. Preventive measures. Rescue, conflict, and preventive measures. We are talking about wildlife in particular. What wildlife requires you to rescue animals. The good part is probably you know or probably you do not know, but you should know this. There is a government law. According to that law, capturing animals should only be done in certain circumstances. You are capturing animals, or let's say the wildlife, the forest officials, they are capturing animals for a particular objective or only in certain scenarios. Like let's say they have entered a civilized area where people live, they have left their abode, they have left the forest area, the wildlife area, the core area, an animal has turned into a man-eater, then only you will capture that particular animal. Alright, that animal would be captured. This is something that has to be done. So there is one term that you are capturing them. The second term is rescue. What does rescue entail? What does rescue mean? Rescue means if an animal is in danger, if an animal is in danger, if an animal is in difficulty, if an animal has been caught somewhere between two branches of a tree, an animal is stuck and that animal is crying for help, then you have to rescue that animal. If there are poachers, if the people have poached an animal, neutralized an animal, then you have to rescue that animal for whatever purpose, for skin, for meat, for sale, then you have to rescue that animal. Are you getting the point? Capturing an animal when the animal is not a difficulty, or animal is not in a difficulty, animal has become a difficulty, you have to capture it. When we talk about the term rescue, rescue means that you are rescuing an animal because that animal is in danger, because that animal is in difficulty, probably belonging to one of those IUCN lists: endangered, vulnerable, critically endangered, about to get extinct, right? All these things are there. So rescue has to be done. And this rescue, people are confusing rescue for preventive measures. Now these are the two things which are contradictory. How? Preventive measures is that an animal should not fall in the hands of poachers, where you have to be very, very tight guarded in terms of your wildlife area, in terms of your national parks area. It has to be tight guarded. But on the other hand, when we talk about rescuing animals, you have to rescue them. Rescue is not a preventive step. It is a reaction. It is a reactionary step. It is a cure that somebody is already in danger. Preventive measures are they should not fall in danger. These two things, they are being confused. Similarly, capturing and preventive measures, they are being confused. We are capturing animals because we are preventing them to fall into any kind of trap. Now this capturing is actually falling into wrong hands. The animals are falling into wrong hands. So this here has become a cause of concern. Probably the people who are actually capturing or rescuing animals, they are misusing these provisions, misusing the laws, and probably they are trying to gain their own advantage with respect to this. So, what does it state? Have a look. Definition and significance of rescue. Rescue entails saving or being saved from danger or difficulty. Rescue. We have rescued this person, evoking hope, admiration of our human responders and acknowledgement of coexistence struggles. So, escalating human-wildlife interactions. Obviously, this would escalate because we have got into the wildlife aspect of things. Underscore the need for effective rescue operations. The effective rescue operations have to come into place. And these effective rescue operations, why? Because of human-wildlife interactions. Who are you rescuing? You are not rescuing humans, you are rescuing wildlife. Reactive capture and relocation. A very, very important point. Reactive means that animal is in danger or something wrong has happened, then you react. Reaction is always after the occurrence of an incident. So, wildlife rescue and capture poses challenges. Wildlife rescue, capture poses challenges requiring nuanced responses. Reactive approaches like capture and relocation often prove unsustainable or fatal to animals. Very, very important point. Unsustainable because it is very expensive, it requires a lot of effort, manpower. It might be fatal for the animal. It might result into animal's death or damaging the animal's health. So, reactive capture and relocation. In order to relocate the animal from one place to the other place, or probably from a human civilized region, from a populated area to an unpopulated area. So it might prove to be fatal because you will neutralize that animal, you will probably give a dart shot. So all this is done. This is done in order to reactive capture and relocate. You are neutralizing the animal with vis-a-vis chemicals, vis-a-vis the elements that you use. Look at this. Successful capture of conflict prone animals involves chemical and physical immobilization. You have to chemically immobilize that animal to sedate that animal. Sedate means you have to make him a little calmer, right? And physical immobilization by skilled teams. This might damage the animal's health. So which is why it can prove to be fatal. Common rescue scenarios include leopards, elephants trapped in human settlements. When they are trapped, they have to be neutralized. So skilled teams do this, but it is a complex objective which is a reactive nature, which requires relocation, which is damaging for the animal too. So how do you try to solve this problem? This problem is not being solved, but certain aspects of this law, this has a particular law, certain aspects of this law are being misused. So look at this, ignored guidelines and consequences. When we talk about central government guidelines advice against unnecessary capture, you don't need to capture the animal unnecessarily, advocating preventive measures. So preventive measures are things that can be used, but only in scenarios where you think that the animal might enter into a man-animal conflict. However, these guidelines are disregarded. This is the big problem, leading to unintended consequences like animal death or displacement. This is something that has to be avoided. Now, this is a catch-22. It's a bone of contention that if you act, if it is a reactionary measure, then the damage has been done. But if you are taking a preventive measure, how do you take? The animal has not done anything, but you still have to take. Then in that particular case, are you using the law or are you misusing the law is a clear-cut case of not knowing what you are trying to do. So, a very good and important term was introduced with the phrase was called ethical intervention. Ethical and effective intervention. Relocation disrupts ecosystems and poses welfare concerns for animals. So welfare concerns of animals is taken into account, which is what requires you to have ethical intervention. Effective conflict resolution requires ethical considerations, research-backed strategies and community involvement. So in this particular case, there is a case study which has been applied by Karnataka, the Karnataka government. What have they done? The KFD employs innovative strategies like EWS, early warning systems. If you are warned early, then you can take a preventive step. It won't require you to take an unnecessary action. Regular monitoring and public education. All of these things are required. These approaches prioritize conflict prevention, welfare considerations, aiming for sustainable coexistence. Highly important that both animals and human beings, they can sustainably coexist. So wildlife rescue and conflict management demand holistic, proactive approaches that consider both human and animal welfare. This is something that we need to understand. That this land this beautiful land, Earth, planet Earth, and our country has been granted to us, it has been bestowed upon us. It has been bestowed, it is as much important for humans as it is for animals. So we have to look after both human welfare, animal welfare. Efforts should focus on preventing conflicts, fostering coexistence and implementing ethical interventions to benefit all the stakeholders. A very, very important term is ethical intervention. But the big question is, do humans understand it? Right? Do we understand it? Is a high point. Knowing about what has to be done. Now coming to another interesting article. Page number 8. Important from the point of view of economics. GS paper 3. Talking about GS paper 3. What is it that we are trying to associate it with? Let's have a look. So we always had the IBRD, International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which is commonly or loosely called as the World Bank. You call it you and I, we call it the World Bank. But actually the nomenclature was IBRD. IBRD is still there. It falls under the term World Bank Group. It's a grouping. It falls under that group. And that group has a single objective called as IBRD, International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Highly important. Looking at these lines, the Asian subcontinent countries thought that we should have a bank of our own, right? That should help certain countries to grow, to become, to grow and to become developed. Because IBRD was giving out loans to those countries. Why was this bank formed? IBRD or the World Bank, it was formed to give out loans for reconstruction and development. The countries that were damaged after the Second World War, their reconstruction required funds, and those funds came from IBRD. So this is something that had to be done. Followed by that, what was done? Another bank was required that does not have dearth of funds, but that is somewhat like the World Bank. It was proposed. It was called as the Asian Development Bank or the ADB. Asian Development Bank, earlier when it was formed in 1966, its focus was on the Asia Pacific region. Asia plus Pacific region. This was the focus. Asian countries plus Pacific countries. So when I talk about these countries, ADB used to focus that they will grant loans to the countries of the Asian subcontinent and the Pacific region so that they get access to easy funds in order to develop. If they are not getting funds from the World Bank, if they are not able to get hold of this, ADB would provide them with funds, and ADB had this very big corpus, obviously not as big as IBRD or World Bank. It had a big corpus, Asian Development Bank. It's an important institution that all of you should know of. Why is this in news? It's a moment of pride for India because our ex-election commissioner, Mr. Ashok Lavasa, has been appointed the vice president of Asian Development Bank, and this has been done on the basis of a heavy voting process that happens within the bank, which is why this is in news. So let's have a look. Election Commissioner Ashok Lavasa was appointed as ADB's VP for private sector operations and public-private partnerships. So ADB is a significant international organization influencing India and other nations, particularly in the financial sector. It was established in 1966. Headquarters are in Manila, Philippines. Remember this for prelims. Facts. And it has 68 members as countries with 49 from Asia and Pacific region. Prelims. Fact. It also has non-Asian or non-Pacific members. That is how 68 countries. So these were the first people or the first presidents. ADB's purpose was to have prosperity, inclusivity, resilience and sustainability to Asia and the Pacific while eradicating poverty. You have to eradicate poverty, and this has been done in order to have Asia and the Pacific region. So Strategy 2030 focuses on responding effectively to the region's changing needs. The changing needs are that we are a victim of climate change, we are a victim of environmental changes, we are a victim of terrorism, plus we also want to tread a path of development. Looking at that, the needs are changing, aiming for a prosperous and inclusive region. And that is how ADB's role would be instrumental for the Asian and the Pacific region. So it is in news. Why? because it raised its forecast for India's GDP growth. Now, India is hugely into this GDP growth, where it has successfully predicted that India would surpass its own potential of growth, 7% to 7% from 6.7%. This is what ADB has successfully predicted, citing robust public and private investment and expectations of a gradual improvement in consumer demand as the rural economy recovers. This is what ADB has projected. Now tell me one thing, the first article that I taught you today, that I discussed today, focused on inflation. How does inflation happen? There are certain demand pull factors. If I talk about demand pull factors, if the demand is high, which is stated over here, the consumer demand is recovering. If the consumer demand is high, obviously it would lead to inflation. On one hand, we are trying to counter inflation. On the other hand, we are projecting a high level of growth. Both are contradicting objectives. Both things do not go hand in hand. Understand this. Trying to achieve one makes the other thing vulnerable. If I am trying to achieve growth, inflation will increase. It goes up. It is directly proportional. If I am trying to control inflation, growth would come down. And this is the sad reality of economics as a subject, which is why economics is called a dismal science. ADB projected that India's economy would expand by 7.2% in fiscal year 2025-26. We are already at this stage in 2023-24, and they are projecting the same rate in 2025-26, which is 2 years away. ADB's forecast is slower than 7.6% pace estimated by India's National Statistical Office for 12 months ending on March 31st. ADB cautioned that its forecast could be proven wrong by global risks such as sharp rise in oil prices or prolonged high interest rates in the West. This is something, so these risks are there, but other than this, India would likely to be the most affected in Asia by high interest rates due to greater sensitivity of the rupee to Western interest rates. This would not lead to more investments in India. If West continues to pay high rates of interest, it would not attract more investment in India. ADB suggests creating large-scale special economic zones with an easier policy environment to boost exports. You have to boost exports, and for that, what do you need? Easier policy environment. So India must integrate better with global supply chains, and at the same time, India has to figure out what kind of investments is it looking for, and are we dependent for those investments on the West? Because if we are dependent on those investments for the West, and the West interest rates continue to be high, we will not attract that kind of investment. And if we do not attract that kind of investment, do we still have the good ability to grow is the big question. Can we still grow? Is a big question. It's a big question mark. So I hope you were able to understand this article, a very, very good article. Now coming to another article, important from the point of view of GS3 Economics, page number 13, focusing on industrial output. Industrial output, so we'll understand about this index first. Followed by that, I'll be explaining to you how these things are important and what impact would it have on the Indian economy. So there's a great index that we calculate. It's by the name of Index of Industrial Production. The IIP, I'm sure you would have heard of it, the IIP Index of Industrial Production. This index gives us the performance of how much the interest rate is rising, how much is the industrial output rising, the rise in the industrial output. So it basically tells us the industrial output increasing, and this increase in industrial output is happening at what rate? So this is the industrial production, the index of industrial production. When we talk about the index of industrial production, in this particular sense, the indexation and the industrial production is something which is leading to what? It is leading to growth. So basically this is the index to measure how progressively we are growing, index of industrial production. Looking at this productivity, looking at this production, looking at this index, what has been done? We have earmarked 8 industries, 8. Out of all the industries, index of industrial production, IIP, out of 100%, 8 industries have been earmarked that have a weightage of approximately 40.27%. 40% roughly. 40% is the weightage of these 8 industries. These 8 industries are called core industries. I repeat, these 8 industries are called core industries. When I call them core industries, it basically means that these industries are heavily important because other industries are dependent on these industries' output, which is why they are called core. Core means most important. Importance is very high. So when I look at these core industries, in totality these are 8 core industries. These 8 core industries, their productivity would affect the productivity of other industries. So what are these 8 core industries? I'll make you learn. 8 core industries, learn the first 5. First 5 are based on energy related industries. What are they? Energy related industries? Coal, crude, natural gas. I repeat, coal, crude, natural gas. Coal is used to produce electricity. So the fourth is electricity. Coal is used to produce electricity. The fourth is electricity. Crude is used to produce refined petroleum products. So the fifth is refined petroleum products. 5 industries based on energy. I repeat, coal, crude, natural gas. Coal is used to produce electricity. Fourth is electricity. And crude is used to produce refined petroleum products. So these 5 industries are focusing on energy. Other than these 5 industries are cement, steel and fertilizer. Cement, steel and fertilizer. These 8 industries are core industries. They have a weightage of approximately 40% in the total index of industrial production. In the total index, 8 industries have 40% weightage, and which is why these core industries are seen at first, and then you look at the other industries. So let's have a look at the IIP. It is an indicator that measures changes in the volume of production of industrial products during a given period. It is published by NSO, that comes under MOSPI, Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. So the growth rate of industry groups classified under broad sectors, mining, manufacturing, electricity, use-based sectors like basic goods, capital goods, intermediate goods. This is all what they consider in order to tell this index. Base year is 2011-12 and it is used by governments and agencies like Ministry of Finance, RBI for policy making. Alright. So 8 core industries, they have a weightage of 40.27%, and these are the 8 industries what I have made you understand and made you learn. All these 8 industries are important. You need to know about the weightage of each of these industries, like which has the highest weightage amidst these 8, which have a lowest weightage. So I've given a chart over here. It is for your perusal. So coal has 10.33% weightage, electricity has 19.85% weightage, refinery products have a weightage of 28.04%, this is the highest, and the lowest is fertilizer, 2.63% weightage. So you have to remember this, which has the highest weightage and which has the lowest weightage. So the news is that India's industrial output growth in February was 5.7, a 4-month high, compared to January's upgraded 4.1. 5.7 to 4.1, 5.7 to 4.1. Growth was led by 8% increase in mining and 7.5% surge in electricity generation. So we have grown from 4.1 to 5.7. Consumption remained uneven, with non-durables output contracting again, while durables grew in double digits, which is good. They grew in double digits, which means they are being demanded. IIP decreased to a 3-month low of 147.2. with output levels dropping 4.1% from January. Manufacturing, mining and electricity, as well as 6 use-based classifications of factory output, all experienced contractions, which means that their output has come down. Year-on-year manufacturing growth increased to 5% from 3.6%. Base effect skewed this. You don't have to go in this much detail, but the point is that February growth was at a 4-month high. But overall, the index of industrial production is not growing. So this is again a cause of concern, right? So these were the articles. We have framed some mains-oriented questions. Look at the mains-oriented questions. Evaluate the opportunities and challenges posed by the internet in the context of globalization and suggest measures to harness its potential for sustainable development. How can we use internet for sustainable development? By imparting education, by reaching out to people, by more awareness. Discuss the challenges faced in managing inflation amidst economic volatility and suggest innovative policy measures to achieve price stability and sustainable growth. So price stability and sustainable growth both are required for this, and amidst economic volatility we have to suggest innovative policy measures. So this is something I want you to think on, what all can be done by, so inflation control can be done by two authorities, RBI and government. What all can be done on these two objectives? This is what you have to write in the comment section below. Alright. Now coming to the prelims bites, researchers at Indian Institute of Science have developed a sustainable hydrogel to remove microplastics from water, which is very good because they are affecting our health. Microplastics, they are tiny plastic debris that pose a threat to health by entering our bodies through the water we drink. So this is impacting our health negatively, and they have come up with what? A sustainable hydrogel to remove this. So this you have to remember from the point of view of prelims bites. Alright. So this was today's newspaper in detail, end to end. We have covered multiple articles. I hope you enjoyed the newspaper today. So keep studying the newspaper because this would be heavily useful for maintaining the flow and also having an entire understanding of what all is going on in the country. So this would prepare you for any government competitive examination, whether you are preparing for UPSC or any exam of UPSC, Civil Services, Engineering Services, Economic Services, or any other regulatory body like SEBI, RBI, NABARD, or for that matter any state PCS examination as well, because it is a part of current affairs and current affairs are important, right? That will be all for today. Thank you so much everyone. Bye. Take care and all the best. See you tomorrow.